don't have any visual aids. I'm just going to stand up here and wander on. But Mary just reminded me that after my talk we're eating cake, so it's probably going to be shorter than it would have been otherwise. I've got one. Where to start? It's been known that there's fossils here since the late 1890s when we had our gold rush, but nobody had paid much attention to them until Wes Weir came along. He was the affiliate curator of paleobotany at the Burke Museum. And Wes was a very urban person. He didn't drive. So when a student from Republic brought a Florasantia over to the University of Washington, he had to wait several years until Kirk Johnson, who is now in charge of, is it paleontology in general?
The director of the National Museum of Natural History.
Yeah, he's gone a ways, but the day after he got his driver's license, he and Wes embarked on a week-long fossil hunting trip, and they came to Republic, where this Florasantia had come from. And nobody seemed to know where there were any fossils around here. And Kirk gives a very interesting story about how they got here and kicked over a rock and found a metasequoia. And after that, Wes got up here every chance he could find a ride. And in the mid-1980s, he was digging over at the corner lot across from City Hall.
Could you close the lid on that laptop? We can't see you.
Darn, I was hiding behind it. Anyway, Bert Chaddick, who was the mayor at the time, went over across the street to find out what this gray-headed individual was moiling around in the rocks for, and found out that we had world-class fossils. You know, who knew? And of course, as the mayor, he was interested in economic development, and he saw this as something really interesting that we might be able to encourage people to come here and find out more about. So Wes and Bert evolved this plan to have a fossil museum. Well, Bert had a shoe repair shop up across the street from the Boot Hill fossil deposit. That's why it's called Boot Hill, because that was the name of the shop. And I, at the time, was a graduate student in anthropology at the University of Idaho, but I would come home quite often, and I took a pair of shoes up to Boot Hill to be repaired, and Bert flew this idea past me, and I said that it was totally insane because Republic would not support an institution like this. And I had just written a report on why the Historical Society Museum wasn't doing well. So I gave it to Bert to read, and he read it and gave it back and said, well, you sound like you know what you're doing, which was a real misapprehension because I didn't. This report was written for a one-semester class in museology, and what can you do with one semester? Anyway, he said, well, you sound like you know what you're doing. Why don't you run it for us? So I became the first curator of Stone Rose, which was a middle photograph there in the bottom. The building across from City Hall, that's where we started. The city had bought it for use as a fossil museum. They gave me the city truck, which had no speedometer, and told me to go over to the government surplus in, where is it? Over on the coast. Auburn, yeah, that was at Auburn, and pick up anything that looked useful. Unfortunately, since I was driving a truck I wasn't familiar with no speedometer, I got picked up for speeding just on the other side of Tonasket, where the big straight stretch is. Didn't get a ticket, just got admonished to get it fixed. Well, it wasn't my truck, so I didn't have much to do with that. So I went over to Auburn and picked up an odd assortment of hammers and chisels because I knew we were going to need them to split the fossils. Old hospital sheets to dye for curtains, a couple of file cabinets, just miscellaneous stuff, anything that looked useful, and came back, and we proceeded to put together sort of a museum in the front room of that house. Had a couple of glass and wood display cases that had been given to us, one of them so warped that we had to winch it back into shape. And they hired me and hired a recent high school graduate from Curlew, Lisa Phillips, to be my assistant. The city had a small collection of fossils, so we laid them out. The ones that were identified, we laid out with their modern analogs so that people could see, yes, this looks like a horsetail fern. And we had our grand opening. I'm an archaeologist, so my dates are all, plus or minus 20 years, but I think it was 1987 that we had our grand opening, and we really lucked out because I had been working previously at the Ozette archaeological site over on the coast, and the old Seattle PI newspaper had paid a lot of attention to that site, and we had hosted their science editor frequently. So I called Hill Williams and I told him, we've got something really interesting in the scientific line. Why don't you come over and look at our grand opening? So he not only came, he brought a photographer. So we got a big spread in the PI in Seattle. And I think that's one reason that we have had success recruiting members on the coast, because of Hill Williams and what he did for us with that first opening. And from there on, it's just kind of grown. We've had a succession of good directors. A couple of school teachers that visited us there moved into the area, and Lisa Barksdale took over from me. And she and her partner, Mary Waring, really sort of made the foundation of the Stone Rose that you see today. The Friends of Stone Rose Fossils, who are actually celebrating their anniversary, didn't come along until a couple of years later, when we put together a nonprofit. Initially, Stone Rose was part of the city park department, which made me a city employee, which was a little awkward because city employees had to live inside the city limits, and I live at the lake. And at $600 a month, there was no way I was going to be renting an apartment in Republic. They eventually raised me to $625, I think. But I don't know what else to say. The rest of the development of Stone Rose has been carried on by other people, and they're doing a heck of a job. I mean, we're really progressing in the direction that Wes wanted us to go. They wanted a world-class interpretive center for world-class fossils, but don't spend any money. But you're doing a lot better. But I would like to announce that tomorrow, as part of the Historical Society's contribution to this weekend, the museum across the street from the park will be open. And I think that's about it, really.
Can I share something?
Okay, what are you sharing? Oh, Lord. Stone Rose Daily Log, 1988. 1989.
Madeline is detail-oriented.
Well, I used to be. I'm
But
getting
I just wanted to
fuzzy.
share, as I read
gonna
through
embarrass
I've
me,
been
aren't you?
going through historical stuff for Stone Rose.
You're going to embarrass me, aren't you?
No. I'm going to... Two ladies who are moving in up to Rhoda Creek from California, very enthusiastic. One a grade school teacher, one a history, econ, and government instructor, donated $20. We'll be back. They dug. I went back to the stratum, below Wes's productive stratum. And anyway, that's the first mention of Lisa and Mary, who had moved here, and Lisa became the second curator for Stone Rose, and was employed for 1989 to 2004. and has recently relocated over on the coast. But she was instrumental in building Stone Rose to where it has becoming. Thank you, Madeline, because you started it with Wes.
It was great. We had no idea what we were doing. We were just making it up as we went along. If anybody can get a hold of a copy of the Volume 24, Number 2, June 1996, Washington Geology, which no longer exists, there is a more formal history of the early days of Stone Rose in that.
It's available online.
It's available online, okay. So, Kate,